All right. I'd like to welcome everybody tonight. We'll go ahead and get things started. My name is Dave Crawford. I graduated from the engineering school here at UCLA back in 1990-something. I have currently serve on the Alumni Association Board of Directors. I also had the distinct pleasure of working with Marty Sklar for over a decade at Disney Imagineering. And it's my distinct pleasure tonight to talk a little bit about the background and the future of this award. But before I do that, I would like to first acknowledge and thank a couple members of the family, Leah Sklar, Marty's wife, and Leslie Sklar, his daughter, for their involvement, continued involvement and presence here tonight, and just let you know how much Marty continues to mean to this university. So thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, so this is an amazing award tonight that we're here to celebrate, and it can actually trace its roots, the roots of the program back to 1955, when UCLA featured 6 lectures from notable figures across the campus. It was sponsored by the University Religious Center, and these lectures lasted from early October to late December of that year. They featured distinguished UCLA figures such as philosophy professor Abraham Kaplan, noted chemistry professor Kenneth Trueblood, and of course, renowned coach John Wooden. But it wasn't until 2010, with the help of a very special Bruin, Marty Sklar, that the Alumni Scholars Club revived the tradition and began the My Last Lecture Award. Through an online nomination process, the student body selects an inspiring professor to give a lecture that will answer the question posed to those original lecturers over 50 years ago. What would you tell your audience if you had but one lecture to give? Your last lecture on Earth. Well, last year, we lost our dear friend Marty, and the impact of this loss is still felt very deeply, both at Disney and UCLA. Marty had an immeasurable impact on both organizations. After leaving UCLA, where he was editor of the Daily Bruin, he joined Disney in 1955 as editor of the Disneyland News. He played key roles in the growing entertainment company for the next 54 years, including leading Walt Disney Imagineering for 30 of those years, and having the sole distinction of being the only Disney employee to attend the opening ceremony of every Disney theme park in the world. Marty retired in 2009, and I can still remember the awesome celebration we had for him on campus. We had a huge patio party with lots of Sklar pun-themed poster attractions, like the Pirates of the Sklarabien, among many others, as well as custom composed and performed musical numbers from none other than Richard Sherman. It was absolutely incredible. And it really made me reflect on the incredibly meaningful impact Marty had on my own personal life. I actually met Marty right after my junior year here at UCLA when I applied for a summer internship at Walt Disney Imagineering. I joined the Ride Engineering Group, and I was blown away that someone at Marty's level was so involved with an intern program. Despite everything on his plate and everything he had to do, he would come by every week to hear what we were doing, how we were doing it, and how we felt about the company. It was truly inspirational. Marty also personally recommended me for my first job out of UCLA when I graduated and Imagineering wasn't hiring. I think he called in a favor for a small special effects company and got my start in the entertainment industry. When I eventually returned to Disney, though, Marty wasn't shy about asking for my involvement in the numerous community outreach programs he was always involved with, especially when they included UCLA. His love for this school was immense, and he loves everything that it stands for. When he termed out on the Alumni Association Board of Directors, he encouraged me to volunteer, and it was that led to my eventual nomination and involvement with the Alumni Association myself, and I'm about to term out here in another month. So an amazing impact in my course through UCLA. I'd like to think that our Bruin connection was a special thing between he and I, but I know that my story is one of hundreds, if not thousands, of people that he meaningfully motivated and touched throughout his life. And it was really an important part of me becoming who I am through my career. And tonight it is my great honor to announce that the UCLA Alumni Association, in partnership with the Alumni Scholars Club, is officially renaming this award the Marty Sklar My Last Lecture Award. This renaming in Marty's honor is a wonderful acknowledgement of how he positively changed the lives of so many people that he interacted with through his life. And it's also an aspirational goal for the inspirational professors that will receive it in the future. Thank you.
Thank you all again for coming out to the 2018 Marty Sklar My Last Lecture Award. My name is Megan, and I'm the Vice President of the UCLA Alumni Scholars Club. I have the pleasure of introducing Professor Bill Simon, but before I do so, I'd like to acknowledge some people without whom this event would not have been possible. So first, my committee members, if you could all stand up there in the back. Okay. They've not only allowed me to boss them around for an entire school year, but they also constantly impress me with their work ethic and creativity. So Leah Savage, Ilana Golub, Aiden R. Sossingham, Riddhi Ravichandran, Artemis Monsur, and sitting outside, Pooja Saran. Next, I would like to thank the Alumni Scholars Club Executive Board for their continued support throughout the school year. They've been helping out with this check-in process, and they're scattered around the room, so thank you guys. And then I would like to thank Anna Hamilton and Jacob Sproul, who are both staff members at JWAC, and they help so much with everything that I've done. And last but certainly not least, massive shout out to George Brown. George never fails to brighten my day and ease my worries with his constant positivity and support. So I appreciate all of you guys very much. Thank you. With that being said, let's focus on our speaker for tonight. We received over 2,000 votes this year, and Professor Simon won by a landslide. You all know his accomplishments already. Chairman of the Advisory Board at the Ronald Reagan Medical Center, the 2002 Republican gubernatorial nominee in California, Assistant U.S. Attorney under Rudolph Giuliani, founder of the UCLA health nonprofit Sound Body, Sound Mind. The list goes on. More recently, Professor Simon has co-founded the Value Investing Program. Students participating in this program will understand the full set of fundamental economic and strategic forces that favor or disfavor a particular investment opportunity. The goal is to prepare students for a wide range of careers within private equity, distressed debt firms, and actively managed mutual funds. Courses are taught by investors in residence, a series of guest lecturers including C-suite executives from some of the nation's largest endowments, hedge funds, mutual funds, and private equity firms. So as you can tell, his professional experiences are vast, but the values and life lessons that he's gained from these experiences are far more so. Professor Simon has consistently been placed in the #1 position for undergraduate teaching within the economics department ever since fall 2015. And in just 1 month of communicating with him, I can see why that is. The first 3 words that come to mind when I think of Professor Simon are thoughtfulness, kindness, and generosity. I was given the privilege of being able to peek into those professor evaluations, and along a similar note, the most commonly used word to describe him was caring. The purpose of my meetings with Professor Simon was primarily to go over the logistics of this event, but once we covered all the business items, Professor Simon would always take the time to inquire about my well-being and my aspirations. He has made himself available as a mentor and now sends me emails notifying me of events that may be of interest to me. Professor Simon teaches economics classes on value investing and is an expert in that matter, but it is his personal investment in students and in student success that makes all the difference at a school as large as UCLA. The My Last Lecture series asks of professors, what would you say if this were your last lecture on Earth? This question acts as a platform for educators to impart values they've gained through their diverse experiences both in academia and in life. In Professor Simon's case, His combination of thoughtfulness and professional accomplishments culminates in many life lessons that will surely have you leaving this room wiser than when you came in. One student wrote in his evaluation that, "The only thing I can critique is that I wish more students would be able to take this course." Luckily for all of you guys in this room, you have the opportunity to do so tonight. Without further ado, I am honored to present Professor Bill Simon.
Wow. Oh boy. Oh boy. Thank you, Megan. I'm humbled indeed by your kind remarks tonight. Thank you and all your colleagues for all the hard work that went into organizing this event. I think we should give them another round of applause. And I also want to recognize Marty Sklar and his family. They're here tonight, Lee and Leslie. Their longtime commitment, as David spoke so eloquently about, and their contributions to life at UCLA are really the stuff of legend. So I'm very honored to be in the same room as you both and to be, one of the recipients of Marty's award. And I also want to say a special thank you to all the students here. My students, other students, I thank you for this wonderful award. I thank you not only for voting for me, it's always nice to win an election, but also because I feel so privileged to be able to be your professor. So it is to all of you students that I dedicate this lecture this evening. And although it's technically my last lecture, I want to make sure that you know that you're free to email me until my last breath. So let's get started. What do you think? So we got a few nuggets to talk about today. Is that okay? My students know I always like to give a roadmap at the start. So here's the roadmap. We're going to talk about 9 nuggets. They're going to be grouped in 3s. There's going to be 3 general observations. There's going to be 3 human nature observations. And there's going to be 3 career observations. Under general, UCLA is a laboratory of life. We're going to talk a little bit about that. Pick your partners prudently. I promised my wife that I would not talk about her tonight. I'll let you judge if I break that promise. If I do, I hope you'll keep it in this room, since we're all family now, right? And then finally, under general observations, the eternal triangle that we'll talk about: body, mind, and spirit. Human nature, your ego is not your amigo. You can't buy milk at the hardware store. Even as David Kaplan noted, in the Palisades at Norris, you got to walk across the parking lot to Ralph's to get your milk. And Socrates was not a wise guy. He was a wise man. And then, finally, talking about career, presentation skills are critical. 2, don't fear risk, don't fear failure. And 3, pursue your passion, make it your calling. So here we go. UCLA is a laboratory of life. Being a student here is a great privilege, but it's just the beginning. Neither my wife or I had the benefit of being students here. Cindy went to Indiana University, which is also a great school. I went to Williams College, a very tiny school. We didn't know much about UCLA when we moved out here in 1990 with our young family. We first got introduced to UCLA through our son, Willie, who's our oldest child. It began in October of 1990, and it seems like just yesterday. Willie was 3. He wasn't speaking. As parents, we weren't sure what, if anything, was the issue. It was recommended to by some friends of ours that we met that you should take him to UCLA. It's a great place, and have him tested. We did. We came on this campus for the first time to get that diagnosis. And the diagnosis was a harsh one. The diagnosis was that Willie would never speak, that he would be institutionalized by the age of 7, and there was nothing that we could do. One of the worst days of our lives. Today, Willie is 30. He speaks, sometimes more than we'd like. He works at Home Depot, as you can see in the picture here. He lives a full life. So what accounts for the transformation? Well, it was 3 people. First, it was my wife. Now, we've been married for 4 years at that point. We thought we knew each other pretty well. You'll see in life, when you have an unanticipated challenge, that you discover things. And what I discovered about Cindy was that she was single-minded. She was an advocate. She had fierce determination. She was a tiger mom before there were tiger moms. Life lesson. People are going to surprise you, even when they're your wife. Cindy found 2 UCLA specialists, Dr. Ivar Lovas and Dr. David Feinberg, that were specialists in the field of autism. Dr. Lovas was a psychology professor. He had a program. We enrolled Willie in the program, and he was in that program for 12 years. Every week for 12 years, either Cindy or I would drive and just touch base with Ivar Lovas and his staff. I'll never forget, we parked in parking structure 2, right across from the psychology department. It got to the point where, you know that kiosk at parking structure 2? Whoever was there would say, "Oh, Mrs. Simon, so nice to see you." We always felt welcome at UCLA, starting from that very first day. And Dr. David Feinberg, at that point, 1990, he was 28 years old. He was a child psychiatrist. He was assigned to Willie. Well, since then, David is still Willie's doc. And he and Dr. Lovas were, together with Cindy, single-handedly responsible for giving Willie the tools. Willie did the work, but they gave him the tools. And I said to myself, if anybody asked me to do something at UCLA, I'm going to say yes. Of course, I hope tonight there's nobody here in the development area. You like that, Victor? Anybody here from the development area? Okay. All right, so with David Feinberg, while he was practicing medicine, little do we know that he was marching up the administrative side of the house. First, he was made head of the Neuropsychiatric Institute. Then he was made head of the entire health system. And one day he called me, and he said, "Bill, how about you come on the board of the hospital?" And I said, "David, I got to be honest with you. I flunked pre-med in college," which is true. Our son Griffey's here. He went to the same college, Williams College. I tried to be a doc, but I didn't have the right stuff. He said, "Don't worry, we got a lot of docs on the board. I need a friend on the board." And so I was on the board. 2 years into it, I missed a meeting. At that meeting, I got named vice chair of the board. So another life lesson, try not to miss meetings. As time rolled on, we got on campus more and more. I met Andy Atkinson in 2010. He's a professor in the economics department at Dora Costa, who's the chair who's here today. And I had a chance to begin teaching here at UCLA. More on that later. Other UCLA involvements, I had the good fortune of meeting Srini Pullavarti, who runs the endowment. He's here tonight. V.C. Powell, who's at the School of Public Policy, and Sean Tracy, also here at the School of Law. And when Megan called me, in those years, still, parking structure 2, 3, 8, and 9. almost every day of the week. So when Megan called me, first thing I did was say, Megan, that's fantastic. That means I'm going to get to continue to teach, because this is what I love. The second question that occurred to me, but I didn't ask it, was, is there any shot I could get a parking pass? So for us, UCLA has been a laboratory of life. And life lesson, one thing can lead to the next. Nugget 2, pick your partners prudently. There are many types of partners: personal, professional, long-term, short-term. I've been blessed with 2 great life partners. As I mentioned, and as I promised I wouldn't say, my wife Cindy and my brother Pete. We'll talk about my brother Pete first because he introduced me to Cindy. Pete is 2 years younger. He's almost 65, although I know he looks much younger in this picture. He was 30 years younger. We shared a bedroom growing up. We were roommates after college, and now we've been partners for 30 years. I talk to Pete every single day, at least once, if not multiple times. He has strengths I don't have. He's much different. My sister Julie, who's here tonight, could tell you more articulately than I how different we are. But we fit together like hand in glove. People have asked me, brothers, it's unusual that you get along like that. Why? I said, I don't know. I mean, I think this guy is fantastic. So one day, Pete calls me. Now, for the first 11 years of their professional life, my brother and my wife sat next to each other at a financial firm in New York City. They sat on a trading desk. And I'd call, talk to Pete. Sometimes Cindy'd answer the phone. And I would say, hi, Cindy. Never had met her. Is Pete there? One day, Pete calls me about midway through that 11 years and says, hey, Billy, you got to ask Cindy out. She's beautiful. And she and her boyfriend just broke up. I think he may have used the words vulnerable. Life lesson. There are great things right in front of you. I guarantee you. This is my wife, Cindy. I'm not going to make her stand up. Then she would really get mad at me. Anyway, we went out. I fell for her hard. The rest is history. Why I love her. Why she's a great life partner. Not just because she's been a tiger mom to our son, Willie, but she's been a great mom to our daughter, Lulu, our son, Griffey, and to my daughter, her stepdaughter, Carrie. You could see she's beautiful on the outside. Just figure she's just as beautiful on the inside. Now, we've lived on the same street for 27 years. We're going to talk a little bit about that later. And during that 27 years, I think that Ann Sachs, who's here tonight, who's one of our neighbors, and Donna Fole could say that Cindy is kind of the leader of the lady pack in the neighborhood. You like that, Frank? So Cindy calls herself a volunteer and a community organizer. So this picture up top here is a room in our home that was formerly known as the dining room. It has not been the dining room for, what, honey, 6, 7 years now? All the ladies in the hood, you can see them around the table. They needlepoint dolls, and they send them all over the world, as Becky Winding knows who's back there. Cindy and her cronies have shipped out over 13,000 dolls all over the world to various strife-torn areas and places like UCLA Reagan Hospital on Valentine's Day. Cindy's also active in the Y. She's so active, as you can see down here, that they wanted to name a meadow after her, Simon Meadow. It's named after the Simon family, but make no mistake about it, it's Cindy Simon. So, and on the right is our kids' kindergarten teacher, who's the co-founder of Dolly's Making a Difference. Wherever Cindy goes, she makes friends. So those are my 2 life partners. In value investing, we talk about the miracle of compounding. What that means is, if you allow something to continue to grow and you don't spend it, you keep your principal intact, let's say you earn 4%. Over time, if you're patient, you're going to make a ton of money. Why? Because that 4% is not only going to grow on the principal, but in year 2, year 3, that 4% is going to grow on the 4% from the prior year. Right, Fred? So Fred's in the private equity business. He knows. So my brother used to say that keep it simple, right? KISS, keep it simple, stupid. I wouldn't say that to any of us here tonight. But I say rinse and repeat, right? Just keep doing it over and over again. It's worked wonders when you have two life partners like my brother and my wife. They just get better every year. I mean, sure, there's ups and downs, no question about it. But when you can complete each other's sentences, like my brother and my wife and I, that's a great benefit. It's a real blessing. So most people, they're lucky to have one life partner. Me, I'm incredibly lucky to have two life partners. Other partners, work partners. This fellow up here on the right, Andy Atkinson, as I mentioned, Dora knows, professor in the economics department, he gave me my first shot to teach. Without Andy, no teaching. Without the students tonight, no award. Oh my God, am I a lucky guy or what? Umberto, the unsung hero. Umberto, stand up. Umberto is, yeah. My students know Umberto as well as they know me. Why? He's got a master's in economics. He's the one with the street cred. I don't have any master's in economics. So Umberto runs our value investing program that Megan told you about, and he also helps, with the teaching, and more than just helps. And then the final two partners that I want to talk about are my assistants at work, except for one thing. That's the wrong title. They are my partners. I want them to stand up right now. Denny Cohen and Tony Winston. Everybody knows Denny and Tony. Yeah. So am I a lucky guy? I mean, they are terrific. So nugget 2, pick your partners prudently, especially your life partners. Nugget 3, the eternal triangle, body, mind, spirit. I can see Frank nodding his head because, for us as we get a little bit older, we realize how important balance is. And I always like to quote Aristotle, not just for David Kaplan's benefit, because it makes me seem like I'm academic. Right, Dan? I mean, we'll talk about Dan in a second. Ancient Greek thought and Roman thought was a sound body and a sound mind. Aristotle talked about the golden mean and balance, and about how you try to have a life that has a little bit of everything, a little bit like Noah's Ark. Later in the Middle Ages, Catholic theology added the idea of spirit, added the idea of love uniting, this wonderful triangle, body, mind, spirit. So let's talk about each of the legs, briefly. Body. I have a radical idea to put forward to you today that is born of experience. And that radical idea is that physical education in school is just as important, right, Kayla, as math, English, and history. I know there are probably a few professors that would not agree with me, but that's okay. I think I got the facts on my side. Here's why. Recent research, Dr. Ming Guo knows all about this. She's one of the nation's leading experts on Alzheimer's, here right now, on the faculty here at UCLA, shows that there's a connection between a healthy brain and a healthy body. Second, physical activity improves academics. I know personally, I was a decent D3 athlete. I was captain of the tennis team. I couldn't have made UCLA's tennis team, but I wasn't bad at Williams College. And I knew one thing. During tennis season, my grades were higher. Why was that? Right, Dora? I mean, it's because it does something to your brain. We have a solution that we stumbled on, like so much in my life that I've stumbled on. And it's UCLA Health, Sound Body, Sound Mind. Here's what happened. We live on this street in the Palisades. One of our neighbors said, would you like to give some equipment to our local high school, Pacific Palisades High? There's no equipment, as Jordan Kaplan can tell you. He went to Pali High. So we did. And what happened? A week later, Santa Monica called us. Then Monsignor Torgerson called us. Then Venice High called us. Before you knew it, we were swamped with requests. So we knew one thing. As an economist, there was a lot of demand, right? I know that much economics. Also, I know there was no supply because all these places were calling us. So we learned, once we started going into all these schools, that there's no money spent on PE almost anywhere in the country. In LA, they spend $50 per child, whereas per child, they spend $12,000 in the school system. There's no emphasis put on it. So we followed this opportunity. We followed this opportunity to address what we saw as a huge need. And now we're in 125 schools, impacting over 140,000 students each and every day schools in session. And we've been assumed by UCLA Health. So now it's called UCLA Health Sound Body, Sound Mind. And I just want to show you a little video before I do. Life lesson, you never know when opportunity will arise. So here we go.
UCLA Health Sound Body, Sound Mind is an organization dedicated to fighting childhood obesity by providing Los Angeles middle and high schools with state-of-the-art fitness centers, an innovative physical education curriculum, and professional development for educators.
There's a real link between physical fitness and academic performance, a real link between physical fitness and feeling good about yourself. We believe that anything we can do to encourage kids to break a sweat, it will change their life.
UCLA Health Sound Body, Sound Mind proudly works with over 125 schools in Los Angeles, impacting more than 145,000 students a year. The strength of the program lies not only in getting students moving, but also in changing their mindset surrounding physical fitness and helping them maintain that outlook for life.
So that's the body. Let's talk about the mind. Charles Munger is a famous value investor. All my students know that, right, Colin? Charlie Munger is Warren Buffett's partner for the last 50 years. Charlie Munger lives here in LA. He is not a shrinking violet. He's known as someone who speaks his mind. So here's what he said about lifelong learning. In my whole life, I have known no wise people who didn't read all the time. None. Zero. So life lesson. Learning continues after graduation. For me, I've been blessed these last 15, 20 years. Number one, I ran for governor. And, you learn a lot when you run for governor, as Dan Schnur knows. He ran for Secretary of State and is an esteemed political, advisor to an awful lot of great people, including Governor Wilson. And you learn a lot about California. You learn a lot about a lot of issues. I was riding around one time in a car with my wife, and a reporter asked me a question on an issue that I didn't know about. And I said, it's a very interesting question. Unfortunately, I have to run. I got in the car, I called my consultant, and I said, what was that issue all about? And where should I stand? And my wife said, you're running for governor. Why do you have to ask somebody where you stand on stuff? But there's so much that gets thrown at you. It broadens your mind. It really broadens your mind. And later, now that I've had this blessing of teaching, I joke that two of the disadvantages are, number one, you got to go to class, and number two, you got to be prepared. So I've learned a lot about investing while teaching investing because I have to stay current. I got to keep reading. So I think the mind is such a beautiful thing, but it's like something physical. You got to keep exercising it, especially as you get older. Now, spirit and love, my family, most of whom live back in New Jersey, when they see me talk about things like this, they might say, I think you've been in California too long, Billy. But I believe it, not just because my pastor is here, but I believe it. I believe spirituality is something beyond your mind and your body. I'm not espousing one particular tradition, but I'm saying that we all know, in my tradition as a Catholic, we talk about the 9 fruits of the Spirit. We talk about love, joy, peace, patience, goodness, kindness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. And the greatest of these is love. And why? Because it transcends all the other wonderful spiritual gifts. And that's why it unites the triangle of body, mind, spirit. So my perfect day, break a sweat, say a prayer, read a book. All right, now we're going to get into human nature. Nugget 4, your ego is not your amigo. Ego 101. We are wired to have healthy, to be charitable, probably more likely, unhealthy egos. Now, I have a dear friend, Frank Baxter, who's here tonight with his wife, Kathy. He has said, and repeats many times, I call Frank my fortune cookie friend. Right, Kayla? Because he has a lot of sayings. One of his sayings is, the mind, as you can see, is a good servant, but a terrible master. You got to keep your mind on a short leash. Sometimes our egos are too big. Sometimes our egos are too small. My pastor, Monsignor Torgerson, who I've mentioned, he and I and Frank get together a lot of Sunday mornings just to have a cup of coffee. And you know what he told me some months ago? He said, you know, Bill, I've been hearing confessions for 53 years. Right, Monsignor? He said, I'm not going to tell you one thing that I heard, but I'm going to tell you one general thing. We are all the same. Right, Monsignor? We're all the same. That's another reason I love teaching. Because regardless of how we're wired, to be fearful, to be greedy, to be egotistical, deep down, we're all the same. And mine has got me into trouble occasionally. I could give a whole lecture on how my mind got me in trouble. You see up there the Pat Coyne story? Probably my worst investment. Here's what happened. In 1998, I came home for dinner. Cindy said, how was your day? I said, fantastic. We closed a deal. We bought a company. She said, oh yeah, what kind of company? I said, it's a company that owns payphone booths. She looked at me like I had 3 heads. See this on the left here? You know, you may not recognize that because you don't see him. You don't see him that much anymore. That is a payphone booth. And I said to Cindy, you know, trying to keep my ego in check, but not doing such a good job. I said, honey, you wouldn't really have any way of knowing this because I've been studying payphone booths for 3 or 4 months. And there's a window of opportunity. You know, there was a cell phone in my computer bag, and she said, what about the cell phones? I said, they're really not going to get that big for about 3 or 4 years. Well, I said there was a window of opportunity. And you know, there was. That window closed about 5 years before we bought that company. So if I think about, and some of these come from people in the audience, old pals like Frank and others, ego's greatest hits to me, I may not be much, but it's all I think about. My mother, when I was going through a rough patch one time, said, you know, no one likes a martyr. Why don't you go volunteer at Covenant House? Because you're going to really see people who have problems. Don't you know who I think I am? Like when you're at that, in the airport, right? And they don't have your reservation ready immediately. You're like, oh my God, don't you know who I think I am? You could do anything you want in life as long as you can accept the consequences, because the consequences are inevitable. Reality is an acquired taste. You could say the flip side of that coin is embrace the hand you're dealt. Take yourself with a grain of salt, and sincerity means more than dexterity. These are kind of my ego greatest hits. The right-sized ego, self-knowledge with humility. The right-sized ego is a goal. For me, that has been a lifetime project, believe me. Oh, that's good. I'm going to shut that off. Okay, number 5, the second nugget for human nature is you can't buy milk at the hardware store. So what does that mean? You can't change human nature. Don't keep going back to the hardware store asking for milk. Story. About a year or two after Cindy and I were married, we were getting ready one night to go out. And Cindy says to me, "How do I look?" And I said, "Honey, you look beautiful. I'm not crazy about that dress." You know what Cindy said? "That's not what I asked." I said, "It looks beautiful." And that's where I said to myself, I'm a man of principle. My first principle? Flexibility, right? So let's talk a little bit about some of my favorites as far as human nature goes. And I would title this, Look Behind the Curtain. Look to see what's really going on. So Warren Buffett, one of my favorites, so I often quote, says, when you're dealing with an investment banker or anybody from Wall Street, remember, don't ask a barber if you need a haircut. Because you know, right, what the answer is going to be. And you can apply that to a lot of areas of life. Second, don't get dressed up when you go to buy a car. Right, Leah? I don't know about Marty, but I know my dad, when he went to go buy a car, he put his jeans on, right? He put his shirt with rips in it. And he didn't want to look anything special. And then the next one, to me, is my favorite. It's the 4 most expensive words in the English language. This time is different. We are wired to be fearful and greedy, so things are going to repeat themselves. Mark Twain said, history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. Right? Things happen over and over again. So I'm going to give you a little advice tonight. I give it to my class, and we have a little fun with it. I will say that if you ever, for the rest of your life, hear these 4 words, this time is different, run the other way. Don't walk, run. And I guarantee you, towards the end of your life, you'll look back and you'll say, mostly that worked really good. Okay? Human Nature 301. That's advanced. So, first, trees don't grow to the sky. I once said it to my class. A student raised his hand and said, I know why that is. I said, why? Because of the root system. I said, I'm sure that's correct, although, you know, frankly, I don't know anything about botany or biology or any of that stuff. But what I do know is that something doesn't go on forever, right? So you can't underestimate the importance of emotional IQ and common sense. So for me right now, I'm not going to make any predictions. But I'm going to tell you, I think the stock market's due for a correction. My brother tells me that I've predicted 22 out of the last 2 recessions. So don't necessarily listen to me, right? My wife says, bulls, bears, and pigs. It's a common saying on Wall Street. Bulls, people who think the market's going up, they can make money. Bears, people who think market's going down, they can make money. Pigs, they don't survive. So if you're going to bet on any of these trees on this campus touching the sky, you know, you're not going to survive, at least with your money. Don't ignore the obvious. So we used to say in New Jersey, denial is not just a river in Egypt. Denial. So my best investment, I tell you about my worst one? My best one is our house. So Ann and I, we live in the same neighborhood, and you know, we've been there a long time. We've been on the same street 27 years. I've watched the cycles go up and down. I've watched construction. When there's construction in the hood, you're due for a peak. Why is that? Because everybody's feeling flush, they're spending their money, they're feeling really good about life. And it's usually the case. And when there's no construction, usually you're at the bottom. It's right in my neighborhood. If I had not bothered picking stocks and I just bought real estate in the neighborhood based on that benchmark, I would have made more money. The house was my best investment. So remember, you really can't change human nature. and you can't buy milk at the hardware store. Okay, number 6. Socrates was not a wise guy. He was a wise man. So I grew up in New Jersey. You don't want to be a wise guy in New Jersey. You do not want to ask too many questions because you're always hearing things like, forget about it. You don't want to know. And then, of course, there's the State University of New Jersey. What's the matter, you? You like that, doll? So I'm telling you, Socrates asked a lot of questions. He would have lasted about 15 minutes in New Jersey. He only lasted a couple of years in Athens before they knocked him off, right? And why was that? Because he walked around saying, why? All I know is nothing. He'd say things like, acknowledgement of ignorance is the beginning of wisdom. Those folks in Athens must have said, this guy, let's get rid of him. So why do we still talk about Socrates? Because he was a wise man. In New Jersey, maybe a wise guy. In the world, he was a wise man. And why is that? Because he recognized that we don't know all that much. And isn't that the truth? How much do we really know? Frank Baxter says there are two kinds of people. Those that don't know and those that don't know that they don't know. Right? So there are two other examples I'll bring up. Galileo, who got in trouble in the Catholic Church because he said that the earth was not the center of the universe. It actually went around the sun. What happened to Galileo? Life imprisonment. And then, probably my favorite, I don't know if anybody's heard of this, but in 1896, the head of the U.S. Patent Office, who shall remain nameless except on this slide, he said everything that has been invented is all there is to be invented. Let's close the office. There's nothing else to invent. 1896. Makes me feel a little better. Then, when I first started working with my dad, he sent me to Houston to look for an oil and gas opportunity. He said, there's a lot of oil and gas down there. After a couple weeks, I came back. I said, Dad, I found an incredible opportunity. He listened to me for about 30 seconds, and he said, how did it make it out of the petroleum club? Now, I said, I don't even know what the petroleum club is. Well, he said, you better find out because that's where all the experienced people go to make their money. And Wyatt got out of there, and you got so lucky, you up in New Jersey, you might want to think about that. So, life lesson. If it's too good to be true, it usually is. So the solution is we should proceed carefully and ask a lot of questions, even if we're in New Jersey. Number 7, the start of the career nuggets. The first one, presentation skills are critical. Why? Well, they're important in my worlds that I've inhabited in business, foundations, politics, because that's the principal form that you convey your message. It's writing is not as important. And it's important one-on-one, groups like this, smaller groups, bigger groups. I just can't tell you how important communication skills are, oral presentation skills. It's underrated now in academia. So here is a place where I might part company with some of my brethren. I teach rhetoric and advocacy at the law school. And in the last 150 years, rhetoric has disappeared. For the 2,000 years before that, starting in ancient Greece with Aristotle, you'll see I keep quoting Aristotle, it was part of the curriculum. It was one of 4 major areas. So why is that? My own theory is that it's viewed by many in academia as pure salesmanship. It's not content-based. So sometimes people say, Bill, you get great evaluations. I hear you're very entertaining. I take it as a compliment, but occasionally I think I understand that it's really not content-based in their view. So I'll tell you 2 quick stories. My dad, who was not known for his patience, He was known for his risk-taking. He was known as a tremendous success, but he was not all that patient. So I would write him a memo, because I'm a recovering lawyer. And he'd call me in the office. He'd say, I looked at your memo, which really meant I realize it's a memo, but that's about it. And he said, I'm just going to give you some advice. Don't tell me how the watch is made. I just want to know what time it is. Second story. I went on the board of my college almost 20 years ago now. And the first meeting, I was with another alum that was in his first meeting too. He's a partner at Goldman Sachs. And the president said, we're going to do curricular reform. This guy raised his hand and said, we should have speaking presentations as a requirement. And later, we were talking, and what he said, Pete Kieran, he said, you know, I'll tell you a dirty little secret. The memos I get from my junior associates and vice presidents, I read like the first page, and I call them into my office. And I say, tell me what this memo says. I'm a little confused. And if they couldn't explain it in 2 or 3 minutes, that was it. So you might say, that's not fair. As Dad would say, that's life. 2 things about presentations, and then we'll move on to nugget number 8. First, you are the message. You know, as a trial lawyer, which is what I was in the 80s and 90s, you always focused on the content. When I ran for governor, I focused on the content, and people walked out. You know why? Because they could. You know, students, they can't walk out usually. You know, the judge, he can't walk out. When you're campaigning, they could walk out. And so I learned that I had to be a little bit more lively. And I had to figure out what was going on. And what I learned, 85% of your message is you. All professional consultants, Dan would say this, Cecile would say this, 85% of your message is your body language, your eye contact, your hand motions, your attitude, you know, however you convey that message, no matter what the message is. So that's the first. Second thing is, people usually have short attention spans. You know, I'm not accusing you all, of course, of having a short attention span, but generally speaking, audiences do. You got to get to the point. You got to make your footprint. You know, I had the pleasure of working a little bit with Jordan Kaplan, David's son. And Jordan's great at digesting things, boiling things down, right, Carmen? Into a saying, a soundbite, something like that, that people will remember. In the communications business, they say, leave a footprint, whatever it happens to be. So that's the unexpected elements. That's number 7. Number 8, don't be afraid to take risks. Don't fear failure. So for me, we all have our heroes, right? And as I mentioned, Dad was not well known for his patience and for some other qualities, but he was a great risk taker. He started out with nothing on the Jersey Shore. My mother was in the next town. They got married young. By that point, Dad had already flunked out of 2 high schools, had to go in the Army, and he was such an underachiever that my mother's father said to my mother, don't go out with Bill Simon, he'll never make anything of himself. I mean, ultimately, he was Secretary of Treasury, amongst other things. You can imagine, Dad did not let his father-in-law forget that, right? Life lesson, no matter what hole you're in, it's shallow. And Dad used to say the first law of holes, stop digging. He got a break. He never looked back. Extraordinary list of accomplishments. He did it by taking risks and not fearing failure. Late in his life, he wrote all 7 of us kids a note. Julie got it, I got it, we all got it. And I have it framed in my office. Life is wonderful. Live it, love it, laugh, cry. Don't ever fear taking risks, and don't fear failure. You come this way but once. This is not a dress rehearsal. I think that's good advice. Risk 201. In value investing and in life, a lot of times you're a contrarian. What does that mean? That means a lot of people think you're on the wrong side of things. You might even be foolish. Life lesson, do your homework. It's the process, not the outcome. Crowd mentality. We all know that people travel in packs. A lot of times we're in the pack, you know. Try not to be in the pack. In value investing, as in life, do your own homework. Come to your own conclusions. Stay away from cocktail parties during frothy periods like the first tech boom. Because you know what happens? You hear about somebody making an investment like in our neighborhood and they tripled their money and you're thinking, I'm as smart as they are. I'm going to do exactly what they do. Big mistake. Cocktail parties can be a dangerous place to find out who you are. Don't fear failure. I'm a people pleaser. Running for governor pretty much wiped that out, right? Why? Well, because, well, I'll tell you what happened. So I lost. And I got close, though. I got 3.1 million votes. Unfortunately, my opponent got 3.4 million votes. The next day, Cindy called and said, can you pick up a prescription on the way home? I said, sure. And I was walking back to my car. It was raining. And I was at a red light. And there was a lady next to me, and she was soaking wet. I said to her, are you okay? Is there anything I can do? She said, I'm super, because that guy Simon lost. I didn't like him. I said, okay. Thank God it was raining. Maybe she didn't recognize me. And as I walked back to the car, I realized 3.4 million people voted the way she did. If only 10% of them thought the way she did, probably it's higher, but just 10%, that's 340,000 people. I can't shake 340,000 hands for the rest of my life. So I better just let it go. And you know what I found? It didn't make a difference. People now, not as much, but occasionally they'll stop me and they'll say, you look familiar. Were you on a TV show? I don't think anybody in years has said, did you run for governor? And I'll bet if I ran into that lady that was at the light, she would say, you look familiar. You look like such a nice fella. I've had that happen. But I wouldn't tell her that I was a conservative Republican. So a life lesson. Don't take yourself too seriously. It's never as bad as it looks, and probably it's not as good as it looks either. Okay, the ninth and final nugget. Pursue your passion. Make it your calling. Passions. We all have passions. I've had a number in my life. A calling is a more profound activity. Teaching has become my calling. One helpful sign for me is that it didn't run in my family. I would call it a contrary indicator. Nobody in my family was saying, you ought to go become a teacher, certainly not my father. He was saying, you ought to go into banking, where real people go. And I said, you know, I compromised. I went into banking. And so it came from left field. Now I'm going to tell you a story. I told you a little bit about David Kaplan. David Kaplan has been a professor in the philosophy department for 56 years. He found his calling in his 20s. I found mine in my 50s. David and I became friends, and he became my mentor because I work out with his son, Jordan. And one day, his office is in Dodd, where I teach. And one day, he stopped me. He said, hey, Bill, I hear your evaluations are pretty good. Don't you think it's a tragedy that you wasted all those years not teaching? Right, David? I mean, it's the truth. I mean, I didn't waste it. I mean, I'm sure that I wouldn't be able to teach if I hadn't had all those life experiences, but in a sense, David, as he often does, made a very important, very poignant point. Life lesson. When the wind's at your back, when your evaluations are good, run. Don't walk. Go fast. So teaching is a noble calling. I think that we could all agree on that. Aristotle, once again, who I keep trying to quote to build up my credibility, those that know, do. Those that understand, teach. Where I'm from, those that can't do, teach. Right? That's the wrong way to look at it, let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen. Plato, the direction in which education starts a man will determine his future in life. Cicero, what nobler employment or more valuable to the state than that of a man or a woman who instructs the rising generation. Now, there are, I think in fairness, other points of view. Professor Homer Simpson. English, who needs that? I'll never go to England. No brain, no pain. Every time I learn something new, it pushes the old stuff out. So you have to respect different points of view, but I'm siding with Aristotle, Cicero, Quintilian, and David Kaplan. So how it happened, it started as a lark. Dan Schnurr, who's a buddy who I mentioned, we had a meeting. He said, Bill, what are you going to do now? Meaning, are you going to run again? And I said, I'm not sure exactly why. You know what I really want to do? I want to get dressed up like Julius Caesar. I want to walk into a bunch of freshmen someplace, and I want to slam my helmet on the table and say, Veni, Vidi, Vici, I came, I saw, I conquered. And if they all laugh, I know I'm in the right place. Well, Dan said, I'm teaching a course next semester on leadership. Why don't we do it together? We did. We did it for the next 6 years. I cut my teeth. Once again, I say, without Dan, I'm not here. I would have never taught. What happened? And sometimes I do get dressed up. Who do you think that is? My students know that's J.P. Morgan. The evaluations were good. Strangely, I felt fulfilled. You know, after class, I'd walk back to my car. I'd be like, you know, I love this. I don't know where it was coming from. I got an opportunity to teach from Andy here at UCLA in 2010. And once again, it just felt terrific. He was always open to me. I mean, I don't think he'd admit it necessarily, but every year I'd say, hey, Andy, how about I teach another course in investing, or maybe bells and whistles, or Umberto. Then I started hiding behind Umberto. I'd say, Umberto's got an idea. And Andy, thank God, was open to all the ideas. And today, thanks to him and Umberto, we have a whole program for value investing. People that, you know, love investing, like Alex Blagagian, who's here tonight, was a student of mine, and now he loves investing. He's working at a really fine investment firm. So, life lesson. When your fruit grows on the trees of others, you can feel fulfilled. That's what I learned firsthand. That's a lesson from a guy named Peter Drucker. Peter Drucker is a great management guru. And he had a lot of things, a lot of sayings, like Frank Baxter. You know, he'd say, stay with islands of health and strength. Go with what's trying to happen. And he said, try things where your fruit grows up on others' trees. So my fruit of my work, I am so blessed that it grows up on our students' trees. So final reflections. It's been 9 years. My happiest moments professionally are in the classroom and in the conversations that we all have afterwards. I don't know why I've been successful, and I'm not being humble. It's something that I don't completely understand. My passion for investing has led to my calling. It's a miracle, I believe, that I'm standing before you tonight. Remember that spirit leg of the eternal triangle and that feeling of fulfillment. It's something well beyond my mind and my body. You know what I believe it is? I believe it's God. Some might call it God's grace. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. And now I would like to formally present Professor Bill Simon with the 2018 Marty Sklar My Last Lecture Award.
Thank you, Megan.
Thank you. Just 3 very quick notes of gratitude. First, Leah, to you and Leslie for being here tonight and allowing us to celebrate as we acknowledge this lecture forever named in honor of Marty. And I do think he would have so enjoyed tonight. Number 2, to our students, thank you for your wisdom in selecting. I don't think we could have wished for anybody any stronger or any better tonight than you, Professor Simon. So thank you to our students. And finally to you, Professor. These 9 nuggets, they may have been a last lecture, but I think you've launched some conversations for a lifetime. So thank you, everyone, and go Bruins.